Hello, Facebook fans and YouTube fans of DX Engineering. It is Tuesday afternoon here in the Eastern Time Zone of the USA. It is a new year, 2025, and it's 1817 Zulu on January 14th. And this is Tuesdays with DX Engineering. And this is a show where typically we have on DX Engineering employees that you may have talked to on the phone, got an email from, maybe a text message, as we try to help everybody we can have more fun with the greatest hobby in the world. And of course, that's amateur radio. Today, we have George, K3GP, longtime employee here at DX Engineering. And long time you've been helping hams on the phones. George, how are you?
Pretty good, Tim. Good morning to you and good morning to the viewers.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. George, let's talk a little bit about Winter Field Day is coming up. It's about 10 days away. And what are some of the things that customers and amateur radio operators should be thinking about as they're getting ready for Winter Field Day?
Well, like anything for field day, be it summer or winter field day, antennas is the utmost importance. You want them to be very efficient. So certainly if you need wire, we've got plenty of wire for building wire antennas, including we have some 14 and 26 high visible color wires that are available now. And that is very important for safety, because when you're out in a field day situation and people are running around, they may not see a darker colored wire. Another thing that I've been getting a lot of calls about, people are getting cable assemblies. We offer cable assemblies pre-built. We also have both solder on and crimp connectors that people, if they want to do their own jumpers or do their own cable assemblies, they certainly may do so.
Yeah, anymore, I think it's preferred by a lot of amateur radio operators to have the connectors put on by DX Engineering. And now sometimes you have to make the hole a little bigger to go through the wall, what have you on that. But especially in the portable operations, when it's cold outside, that's not the time to be putting on connectors, George, right?
True. You'd be doing this in preparation for going outside. Other than that, the pre-assembled cable assemblies are lifesavers.
They really are. And the great thing that I like about having the connectors put on by our top techs at DX Engineering is that it's tested. And that's what they do every day. So they're professional at doing it, and they get that high pot testing, George. They got the heat shrink with the glue in it. I mean, that really makes it nice. Have you ever had anybody that had one of those fail?
I can only recall one time of a failure of that, and somebody was actually trying to relocate an antenna by pulling on the coax, which wasn't the most straightforward way of doing it.
But let's get back to wire antennas, which is where you started with this. How about, is it a dipole? Is it end fed? Is it random wire? What do you think is the best way to go?
Well, certainly the off-center feds or the G5RV antennas are pretty popular because one antenna can cover multiple bands. Other than that, though, in my own personal experience, I've found that doing multiple dipoles, if you can afford the space on the mast, is a lot more efficient in terms of lower SWR and getting more of a signal out.
Having everything matched really does help signal strengths, and reciprocity is in play here. So an antenna that transmits better also receives better, and that can make a big difference. Especially, George, you might talk about some of the guys that are running 5 and 10 watts QRP.
Oh yeah, there's quite a few of those people, and that's where the antenna is of utmost importance. You want to get every last ounce of RF out of the antenna that you can. So having a very good antenna that's very close to resonance on where you need to be. And of course, for field day, in my particular case, I do a lot of CW work in field day, so I make sure my antennas are tuned at the low end of the bands.
Right, right. And, and having like a rig expert analyzer, how about that, George?
Well, that's a lifesaver. I've had each year I have a set of antennas that I have stored in a trailer that we use for CW at my club. And each year I ring out all the antennas as they're put up. And every once in a while I'll find out that something has gone awry, and it gives me an opportunity to make corrections in a few hours before the fun begins.
Now, George, I know you like to operate RTTY too. Did you participate in the latest ARRL RTTY roundup?
That RTTY roundup, yes, we did hear from my station. It was myself and another one of my colleagues that works for DX Engineering, K3GP, and we were just shy of 1,000 contacts in that period. That contest runs for a full 30-hour period. We only operated 24 hours. Us guys that are getting up there in years got to sleep once in a while.
George, how did you find the bands? I mean, I know that was the beginning of this month, but I'm thinking about what conditions might look like for winter field day.
Well, certainly the bands were pretty hot. We started out on 10 meters on purpose just to see how propagation was. Propagation was quite good. We stayed there for quite a while, and that's where we got most of the multipliers on 10 and 15 meters, and we moved down band by band by band as the various bands opened up. Of course, one of our biggest bands, and it seems to be the money band in a lot of cases, especially field days, 40 meters.
Right, boy, yeah. And you know what I like about 40 meters when we have sunspots is that even at night, the band is good in close as well as far, but you can work some of the close in stations. So being, we're in Ohio or close to Ohio, you can work the W9s in Illinois and Indiana. And sometimes when you have low sunspots, 40 meters is a lot longer. So, but I think that's great advice to start on the highest band that's open.
And that worked very well for us. We did notice, this is, of course, the high spot of cycle 25, and we did notice 80 meters was kind of punk. It was an awful lot of noise. We didn't make as many contacts down there as we would have liked to.
Yeah, that unfortunately, because the activity moves, and you're right, with static and storms that can be, especially down in the south. George, I wanted to take a look at the chat room real quick because we've got some of our regular chat participants on. We have Jose, X-Ray Echo 2 Zulu Zulu is on from Mexico, and Perry from Oklahoma City, November 5 Papa Juliet. Perry was a good friend when I lived down there. And young Michael, W3 Mike Lima, Japan, on part of the K2M crowd. And George, I know, being that you're familiar with Pittsburgh, Michael is in Zillionople. So nice to have Michael on. Our friend Skip Longpath, of course, that's Parky. And always like to have Skip on here. And nice to see you, Parky, here at one of the upcoming meetings, hopefully. And Parky points out, yes, George is a big RTTY operator. He needs a splint on his key finger after the contest.
That's not inaccurate.
Likes that. Also on with us today is Kilo Golf Zero Alpha Fox, and our one of our pilots, Brian Betts, is on. 10 and 15 were great this weekend for the NAQP CW. 80 was also in great shape about 2 hours before the end. And of course, that's W7 Juliet Echo Tango in Arizona. And coming up this weekend is the North American QSO party for SSB. So hopefully, Brian, you'll be on for that. And we've got Papa Echo 2 Kilo on from the Netherlands. And he says, is 80 meters a DX band? Of course it is. Uh, on some bands like 2 meters and 70 centimeters, George, DX might just be 100 miles or 200 miles, right?
It's all on the yardstick you use, that's for sure.
Richard is on from the UK, Mike Zero Delta Sierra Kilo, and from the south part of Sweden, Sierra Alpha 7 India Radio Echo. And of course, boy, the sun doesn't rise very high in Sweden this time of year, so it's good to be on the radio. George, what is the next RTTY event coming up that you will operate?
Well, there's a couple of them. BARTG Sprint at the end of this month, and also the BARTG High Frequency. I believe that's March. Let's not forget you mentioned the NAQP. NAQP RTTY is in February, and earlier in February is the CQ Worldwide WPX. Those are 4 biggies for us RTTY nuts.
Well, and if you have questions about RTTY or making your radio work on RTTY and you want to talk to George, just send an email, dxengineering@dxengineering.com, and the email will get routed to George, and he will be happy to help you get your radio. Sometimes configurations and the contest programs, George, that can be a challenging deal.
Oh, it certainly can, especially when you're using any of the digital modes. And just got to remember, RTTY is a digital mode just like FT8, and you have to be careful and do a little planning and pre-configure. Don't try to get into the contest with just an hour's preparation.
George, real quick while I have you, because you're such a wealth of knowledge in this area, how about AFSK versus FSK? What can you tell people is the difference? What's the advantage of one?
Well, there's a couple of advantages. I tend to prefer FSK. The signals tend to be cleaner. AFSK has gotten a lot better with the equipment. Years ago, people were using relatively inexpensive sound cards to do a AFSK, and they splattered up and down the band. But one of the things you have to look at with AFSK is when you're using spotting networks, that you need to make sure the offset is correct, because if you're using some of the software like the N1MM Plus, if you click on a spot but your offset is wrong, you're not going to hit the station that you think you're going to hit. So be careful if you're using AFSK. There is various parameters in the software that you can set to account for that, and it makes life a lot easier when you're doing point and shoot up and down the band.
There you go. Well, that's really good advice. And see, we also have Whiskey 2 Victor Papa. John is on. John has done a lot of work with DX Engineering products, and John John is in Georgia, and he wrote a nice article about some of our stacking hardware for QST. And speaking of QST, Brian W7JET says, I'll be splitting my time between the VHF contest and the NAQP. He runs QRP Portable for the VHF contest from Mount Ord in Arizona. And so that's right, George. This weekend, it's a double doozy, because you've got the North American QSO party on phone, and the VHF contest is going on. So that's got 6 meters, 2 meters, 70 centimeters. Don't forget about 220. So lots to do this weekend. And George, do you think you'll be on for the NAQP phone at all?
I will a little bit. Unfortunately, I have a conflict. It's called my wife's birthday.
Well, that is something you want to put above this hobby. That's for darn sure. Well, listen, George, thanks so much for coming on today with us.
My pleasure.
Really a joy to have you on, and also just a joy for you to give back to the hobby by talking to people all day long and helping them with their questions here at DX Engineering. And we want to shout out to all the DX Engineering sales staff that might be listening today. Of course, Parky, we talked about Parky, KB8UUZ, who's on here. And Parky is the guy that takes care of all the manuals, tremendous writer, and an award-winning newsletter editor as well. George, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure. In answer to Dan's question, two-tone. Two-tone is the second decoder I use. Take care. Goodbye, everybody.
All righty. And 73 from DX Engineering. We'll see you on Thursday.